My name is Lena, and for 27 years, I believed I was an ungrateful daughter. My parents, Richard and Margaret, adopted my brother Caleb when I was 4 and he was a newborn. They sat me down with picture books about families growing, told me I was going to be a big sister, and that we were so lucky to have him. And for a while I believed it. I held his tiny clenched fist and promised to teach him everything I knew. But the favoritism wasn't a slow burn. It was a flood. Caleb got the new bicycle for his 6th birthday. I got a second-hand helmet to go with the rusty bike from the garage sale. Caleb got piano lessons, then guitar, then a drum set that rattled the walls. I asked for art supplies and was told to use the computer paper from Daddy's office. By high school, the pattern was chiseled into our lives. Caleb's trophies lined the mantel. My report card, straight A's, were met with a nod and a "that's nice, honey." Caleb's bedroom was a palace of sports memorabilia and gaming consoles. Mine was the smallest room, with hand-me-down furniture and a view of the neighbor's air conditioning unit. The crowning jewel came when Caleb turned 18. My parents sat me down. I was 21, home from my state college on a scholarship I'd fought for myself, and announced they were paying for Caleb's tuition at a prestigious private university. Full ride. Tuition, room, board, a brand new laptop, and a car so he could come home on weekends. I had worked 3 jobs through college. I had eaten ramen for 2 years. I had graduated with $30,000 in debt. I remember staring at my mother. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why does he get everything?" My mother's smile was thin. "Lena, don't be petty. Caleb has different needs. He needs more support." "Different needs?" I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "He's a star athlete with a 3.8 GPA. What needs?" My father's jaw tightened. "That's enough. We won't have jealousy in this house." That was the last conversation I ever tried to have about it. After that, I was the problem. The resentful, cold daughter who couldn't just be happy for her brother. I moved across the country. Seattle. A small apartment, a quiet job in data analysis. I kept in touch with my parents out of duty, brief phone calls on birthdays and holidays. They never visited. They never asked about my life beyond polite, surface-level questions. But they sent me pictures of Caleb's graduation, Caleb's new job at a tech startup, Caleb's engagement to a woman named Chloe, who looked like she stepped out of a catalog. I dated, but never seriously. Who would want someone so clearly unlovable to her own family? I told myself I didn't care. I built a shell of solitude, convinced I was just fundamentally lesser. Then my mother died. It was sudden. An aneurysm. My father called me, his voice shattered. "You need to come home," he said. It wasn't a request. I flew back to the house where I'd never quite belonged. Caleb was already there, of course. He wrapped me in a hug that felt practiced, murmured, "It's good to see you, sis," and then immediately started talking to my father about the will. "Dad, we should just get it over with." Mom would have wanted clarity. Clarity. I stood in the kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast alone most mornings, watching them retreat to the study. I was an afterthought. Piece of furniture. The reading of the will was a sterile affair, conducted over Zoom by the family attorney, Mr. Hensley, a man with kind eyes and a calm voice. My father sat next to Caleb on the couch in the living room. I sat in the armchair across from them, a physical distance that mirrored every other distance in my life. "The bulk of Margaret's estate," Mr. Hensley read, "including the family home, the lake house, the investment portfolio, and the remaining liquid assets, are to be held in trust for Caleb Richard Holloway. I closed my eyes. There it was. The final verdict. To my daughter Lena Marie Holloway, I leave my mother's silver tea set and $5,000. I didn't cry. I just nodded. The tea set was sterling, worth maybe a few $100s. The money wouldn't cover a month of my student loan payments. Caleb, meanwhile, was inheriting millions. My father didn't look at me. Caleb, to his credit, looked uncomfortable for about 3 seconds. "I'm sorry, Lena," he said. "I know this is hard." Hard. That was the word for my entire life. Hard and then forgotten. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but I kept hearing my mother's voice. "Don't be petty. Different needs." I wandered downstairs past the study where the light was still on. My father was asleep in his chair, an empty whiskey glass beside him. A thick folder lay open on his lap. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But something in me snapped that tiny desperate part that needed to understand why I was never enough. I gently lifted the folder. It was labeled Adoption Confidential. Inside were documents old and yellowed. A birth certificate for Caleb, a placement agreement, and then a letter, handwritten on elegant cream-colored stationery. The return address was a private adoption agency in a town I'd never heard of. The letter was from a woman named Sarah. She was Caleb's biological mother. But it wasn't the usual adoption paperwork. It was a contract. A financial contract between Sarah and my parents. I read it once. Then twice. My hands began to shake. The letter detailed an arrangement. Sarah was a gifted musician, a former child prodigy. She had gotten pregnant young, and the father wanted nothing to do with her. My parents, who had tried for years to conceive naturally and failed, saw an opportunity. They didn't just want a baby. They wanted a special baby. Sarah's letter spelled it out. "As we discussed, I am giving you full custody of my son, Caleb, in exchange for the sum of $200,000, paid in installments over 5 years. I understand that your primary motivation is not just to adopt a child, but to raise a prodigy. You have reviewed my genetic history, my IQ scores, my musical and athletic pedigrees. You have selected my child because of his potential. I am not blind to this. But I need the money to save my mother's house from foreclosure. So I will make this deal. But I want you to know, I hope you love him for who he is, not for what he can produce." I turned the page. There was a second letter, this one in my mother's handwriting. It was to my father. "Richard, we can't tell Lena. She's too young now, but maybe never. You see it too, don't you? Lena is average. She's sweet, but she's not exceptional. She'll be fine. She'll make a life. But Caleb is our investment. Sarah was a genius. Her father was an Olympic swimmer. This child has every advantage in his blood. If we pour everything into him, money, attention, education, he will be extraordinary. And he will take care of us in our old age. Lena will understand when she's older. She has to. We are playing the long game, Richard. We are building a legacy. I love Lena. I do. But love isn't enough. We need a winner." I read that last sentence 5 times. We need a winner. They hadn't favored Caleb because he was adopted. They hadn't favored him because he was a boy, or because I was difficult, or because of any of the stories I'd told myself for 2 decades. They had bought him. They had paid $200,000 for a genetic lottery ticket. And I was the free, disappointing consolation prize. I wasn't resented. I wasn't even disliked. I was simply discounted. A rounding error in their grand experiment. I sat on the cold floor of the study, the pages scattered around me, and I sobbed. Not for the money, not for the house, but for every birthday I'd watched Caleb open a gift while I got a card. For every dinner where they asked about his game and forgot my debate tournament. For every quiet, devastating moment I'd wondered if I was just unworthy of love. I wasn't unworthy. I was just average. And in my mother's ledger, average was worthless. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen where my father was making coffee. Caleb was scrolling on his phone, already talking about selling the lake house. I placed the folder on the counter. My father's face went pale. Caleb looked up confused. "I know what I am to you," I said quietly. "I know what he is." My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "You paid for him," I continued, my voice steady for the first time in my life. "You bought him because you thought his genes would make him a trophy. And you left me with scraps because I was average. You didn't see me. You never saw me." Caleb picked up the letter. I watched his face shift from confusion to horror to a strange, hollow grief. He looked at my father. "Is this true? Mom bought me." My father finally spoke, his voice a ragged whisper. "We loved you. Both of you. We wanted to give him every chance to succeed." "Every chance," I repeated. "By stealing mine." I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply packed my bag, called a cab to the airport, and walked out the door. Caleb caught me on the front porch. His eyes were red. "Lena, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's the worst part. You got everything, and you never even had to wonder why." "I'll give you half," he said desperately. "The house. The money. Half of everything." I looked at my brother, my bought and paid for brother, who had never been cruel to me, only oblivious, who had accepted the world my parents built for him because why wouldn't he? "Keep it," I said. "You were their investment. Make it mean something." But I'm done being invisible. I flew back to Seattle. I didn't call my father for 6 months. When I finally did, he apologized, a clumsy, stumbling apology about being young and ambitious and wanting the best. He never said the words "I was wrong." He never said "you deserved better." Caleb and I talk now sometimes. He went to therapy. He donated a chunk of his inheritance to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. He told me once over a shaky video call that he wakes up every morning feeling like a fraud. I told him that wasn't his fault, but I didn't tell him it was okay, because it wasn't. As for me, I'm still average. I still have student loans. I still live in my small apartment. But I also started painting again, the art I'd given up when I was 16 because no one cared to notice. Last month I sold my first piece. A small watercolor of a girl sitting alone at a kitchen table, watching her family laugh in another room. The buyer said it made her feel seen. I cried when I hung the sold sign on it. For the first time I understood that being invisible wasn't a curse. It was just a different kind of power. They never saw me, so I learned to see everyone else. And in the end, that was worth more than all of Caleb's inheritance.